Alright gang, Dr. Darbro here. What we're going to do in this video, actually there will probably be three videos. Well, not probably be three videos. There will definitely be three videos. What I want to do is review a little bit about hypothesis testing, talk to you a little bit about errors, and I really want to take a look at interpreting errors outside the realm of hypothesis testing. But primarily what I want to do in these videos is focus on what we call a type 2 error. So again, gang, what we're going to do, there'll be three videos. The first video is just kind of get the ball rolling. Let's step back a little bit and think about the errors. Let's think about the consequences of the errors in different situations outside of hypothesis testing. And then the other two videos that I'll post after this one, we'll get our hands dirty and actually perform some calculations. So let's go ahead and keep it really simple here. If we think about a test of hypothesis, everything begins with the null hypothesis. And remember, in the simplest case, the null hypothesis, for example, could test the claim that the mean of a population is equal to 10. The alternative hypothesis would test, either less than, greater than, or not equal to, depending on the motivation for our test, that it's either greater than, less than, or not equal to 10. Now, a good way, yet a horrible way, of thinking about this is to think that H sub O is either true or false. It's a good way to think about it because it sets up the motivation for type 1 and type 2 errors. It also sets up clearly the definition of type 1 and type 2 errors. The bad part about it is it's not true. When we set this up and look at the null hypothesis and consider that it could be true, well guys, the fact of the matter is this statement in the null hypothesis is never true. Let's think about this. Let's say at a large university that an admissions director claims that the entering average ACT score for all 14,000 entering freshmen is 22. What do you think the likelihood is that you could add up all 22,476 ACTs, add them up, divide by that number, and get exactly 22.000000 forever? It's not going to happen. And keeping that in mind, it's not the motivation for the test. The motivation for the test is to find, is there evidence from our sample? Is there enough evidence from our sample to reject the null? So again, what is the goal of any test of hypothesis? It's not to determine whether the null is true or false. The goal is to determine if there's enough evidence from the sample to reject the null hypothesis. That is definitely going to be a test question, so that's going to be something important. So let me get rid of my stuff here. Okay, so again, what do we want to do here? We're going to assume that the null is either true or false to motivate the definition of a type 1 and type 2 error. But at the end of the day, that's not even the motivation for the test. Again, the motivation for the test is there enough evidence from our sample to reject the null? All right, gang. Nevertheless, having said that, a good way to think about the definition of a type 1 error, it is when we reject a true null hypothesis. I put smiley faces in these two boxes because when this happens, that's when the test has actually worked appropriately. For example, if the null hypothesis is false and should be rejected, then we hope we reject it. When the null hypothesis is true or should not be rejected, then we hope that our decision is fail to reject. Now, what I want to do here is think about this situation in a jury trial. And let's think about something real dramatic. Let's get all crazy here. And let's say that someone is on trial for committing a murder. Now, did they do it or did they not do it? Well, at the end of the day, even though once the evidence comes out, we are pretty sure that they did or didn't do the crime. The guys, at the end of the day, after one sits through a jury, after one sits through a complete trial, they never know for sure whether the person did it, even if they admit to doing the crime. There's a lot of evidence on the books where people have kind of lost their minds, gone insane. Maybe they're just hunting notoriety. They want to become famous, and they admit to something that they didn't do. So at the end of the day, even after the jury trial, we never know for sure whether or not the person did the crime. But if they did the crime or didn't do the crime, the jury is responsible for coming back with either a guilty or not guilty verdict. Now let's think about it. If the person did not commit the crime, which one of these decisions do we hope that the jury comes back with? Well, guys, clearly, we would hope the jury comes back with a not guilty decision. If the person really did do the crime, what decision do we hope that our jury trial or our decision turns out to be? Well, again, clearly we want those people to be found guilty and and pay for the crime, so to speak. Now, guys, clearly these two boxes end up representing errors. This error would be we find a person guilty and they didn't do the crime. This error is the person did the crime, but we let them go scot-free. Now, I'm not going to get into this in this video, but I want you sometimes to think about these two errors. Which one of those do you think is worse? Do you think it's a worse error, or a more significant error, if you will, to put a not guilty person in prison? Or do you think it's a worse crime to let a guilty person go scot-free? Now, once you kind of hash that out, maybe that's something you can talk over with your parents. Maybe it's something that you can talk over with your friends, or maybe it's something you won't talk over at all. But nevertheless, think about, what do you think? Which one of those errors do you think is the worst? And possibly your high school teacher may be able to kind of promote an in-class discussion on this. Now, once you finish that discussion, I want you to step back a little bit from what you think, and I want you to put this in the context of, what does the Constitution think? If you've ever served on a jury trial, or if you've ever watched Law and Order on TV, you always hear them say, beyond a reasonable doubt. How does that fit into the context of making errors in a jury decision? Now, this situation is extremely serious, and far more serious than something we may do in test of hypothesis. For example, if we're testing that the mean ACT for freshmen is 22. Well, it's something we like to know as admissions at universities, but the consequences of an error in that context is not nearly as severe as it would be in the context of a jury trial. But guys, the next example that I'm going to give you is something where actually there could be potentially damaging results if we commit an error. Let's think about medical research. And let's say, for example, that someone or a group, a team probably, of researchers come up with a drug that they think lowers cholesterol. So the goal of the drug is to lower cholesterol, so either it lowers cholesterol or it does not lower cholesterol. Now, the FDA or some testing organization would probably go out and conduct a study And the results of their study would either tell us, hey, cool, this is a cool drug, let's market it. Or, I don't know. There's not significant evidence here that people take this drug that it's going to lower cholesterol. Now, let's think about the 4 possible outcomes. Which of these are good? Well, guys, if the drug clearly does lower cholesterol, then we want to market it. People who have high cholesterol want to have the opportunity to purchase a drug that does truly lower cholesterol. If the drug does not lower cholesterol, then that's a good decision if we don't market the drug. It's like, good try, buddy, but it's not working. We're not going to market your drug. And that is just one ugly head, isn't it? That's let's try to draw a prettier head than that. That was an ugly. Well, that's even worse. So it's just not a day for good heads, right? So, gang, right here is an error, and right there is an error. This error would be what? What would be the consequences of the error in the top left box? We're marketing a drug that does not work. So people are out here they're spending their hard-earned money, or maybe someone else's hard-earned money, or the insurance or whatever, to purchase a drug that's been marketed that actually doesn't work. Well, that's a significant error. What happens here? Well, that's a situation where there's a drug out there that actually does work, but the market research shows that it doesn't, so it wasn't marketed. So we might call this one, excuse the messy writing, but we might call that a missed opportunity. There was a drug that was actually developed, but because the testing went astray, then it wasn't marketed. All right, gang. Let's try to end up this video. So let's think about calculating a type 1, calculating a type 1, type 2 error, and ultimately calculating the power. So the next 2 videos are all going to be about calculating a type 1 error, which you'll find out is really simple. That's just our alpha value. But the calculations of type 2s and power, are slightly more challenging. In fact, it's probably going to be some of the tougher calculations that you make the entire semester. So, all right. So again, let's think about what is a type 2 error. Since we want to know this when we start our next video, the type 2 error is what? Failing to reject a false H sub O. Failing to reject a false H sub O. What is power? It's the probability of rejecting a false H sub O. And guys, at the end of the day, this is the goal of any study, is to come up with evidence that will reject a false H sub O. Alright, gang, that's it. This is the end of this video. See you in the next video.